Hello and welcome to what I would call my mountain and this video. Thanks for tuning in, checking it out. Culture shock, which is what I'm going to go on about today. I've had enough time to think about this, and there are a few things that really just blow my mind. It's that in many Japanese relationships still today, when people marry, although the breadwinner might be the guy, as soon as the guy is married, he then hands over financial responsibility to his wife, and this will go so far as to that he doesn't have any cards, that's like credit card, debit card, anything like that, and the wife will organize the finances of the home and distribute to him per month a monthly allowance. And that just blew my mind. I cannot imagine being in a relationship where, married or otherwise, that I would hand over my finances to my significant other, that they would manage them solely for me, that I would have no other part in that than that I would be given an allowance to do whatever it is that I was going to do. So I find that really, really interesting, and also, as I say, because I kind of have a little bit of the historical background, how you can see how that's evolved from the past history. This is definitely not something new. This is deeply rooted in the culture's kind of roots. And I find that fascinating, I find that shocking, and it's not something that I would ever live by. So that was a huge one that I've experienced since coming here and being able to observe. Another one, not related to finances, now this extending to like the family unit. Once you have a child, that the husband and wife will no longer refer to each other by their given names, and at that point they will only be referred to as mama and papa, kind of like essentially taking on the role of mother and father, as it's a relationship between the adults and the children, and would then even refer to each other in that way, which, you know, just crazy stuff. That I think for me, one of the interesting things that I find about this, I was thinking about maybe saving this to the end of the video to make this point, but I would say it now, is that it's like when I observe these kind of things and they blow my mind, as they cannot help but do, it's not to look at the way that I would do things as superior, but it is totally different, where I have to say I would never be in a relationship, and I would have my reasons, as I'm sure they have theirs, that if I was in a relationship, I've got my wife, whatever your partner is, I've got my wife and I love her beautiful name, and then as a result of tradition, I'm just supposed to, once the kids come around, then no longer say my wife's name, and we revert to these traditional way that we refer to each other. It's so foreign to me, and that really, really, like, you know, it's a crazy thing to think about. I don't know, would you do that? That's something I'm curious down in the comments. Would you be satisfied to live with an allowance? Would you be satisfied to, so to speak, give up your name and then only be referred to as mama and papa? People talk about Japan changing a little more slowly than other cultures, but I think they're right. There's no doubt when you look at these allowances, when you look at these traditional names, just how much that still is the case. So that's my first thoughts. Let's find a cool spot and continue this discussion. I got more thoughts on relationships. Alright, so the next thing I wanted to talk about is that of all the things that I could transport back into my own country, it would be this. And it's the emphasis on community and community relationships in Japan, and the way that I see this connected to so many things: overall happiness, longevity, I would assume as well, and just how profound the impact of community is in Japan. And the place that I've noticed it most of all, and that I would transport back to my own country, is actually when I've been in the gym. You would see other examples of it all over the place, but this is where I see it most of all, and especially as I'm talking towards longevity, because Japan is known as a graying nation. That's no big surprise. Everybody knows that. I can't remember the statistic off the top of my head, but there is some significant percentage of the Japanese population that is over 65. When you go to these gyms, you see one thing, two things actually, that as they relate to what I'm talking about now. And that's, you see a lot of elderly people, and you see a lot of community classes where people are going in and working out together. And I think that occurs, obviously, one, in Japan because you have the older generation, and because of this basic principle of community, that it's way more commonly accepted to go to one of these classes and to work out together and to do your Zumba, to do your body pump, whatever it is. And the benefits of it, I think, could not be ignored. Like, everybody you see coming out of exercise always looks so happy, and none more so than the people who are able to do it in a group and share that experience. Because everybody knows, if you've ever been in a job before where you go through the shit together, that you come out more bonded as a result of that because you overcame that struggle. And I find it absolutely shocking to what degree this happens in Japan, that you get so many people who you would think they're going to sit at home, they're going to be too old, they're not going to go out and be physically active, and they're there in the gym every single day. Like, I go quite frequently. I'm there about 4 times a week, and I will see the same people in there again and again and again. And I relate this to longevity because I have a firm belief that I've developed over time, always waiting to be corrected or evolved a little further, but that so much of our longevity, not in the short term, but in the long term, to be, someone who lives a really long time, it comes from purpose. And you can get purpose from a bunch of different things, but it gets more and more difficult to find that purpose as you get older because there's less and less of those easier to access things that would give it to you. For example, I think one of the biggest things that we as humans share for purpose is that we work and we find meaning in the work that we do, or at least we hope we do. Maybe that's a little bit idealized. A lot of people can't, but if we can, that's a significant, accessible way that we do it. But as soon as you retire, then maybe this thing that you had gotten all this purpose from is no longer available to you. But I think a ton of the people that I see in these classes are all retirees, and they're all there working out together, and they're all finding purpose in this action together. And I think it's really, really important, if I could ever impress that on people back in Canada, get in a group and work out more and do whatever you can to be active. And if we could learn something from Japan about community relationships, it would be just how fulfilling those can be when we do them in a setting where we're exerting ourselves. All right, down from the mountaintop, no more chasing the light. It was getting really, really dark up there. Let's talk about the last topic I wanted to discuss. And this has to do with, again, intimate relationships, and specifically where before we talked about after marriage and after children, this is going to be at the outset of the relationship. So what this is called is confession. And confession is the kind of codified behavior where in Japan, if you have been with someone for about 2 or 3 dates, and it's your intention to see them longer, to perhaps have a more serious relationship, where in the West you would allow things, I would say, to develop more organically, and you kind of just have a feel for whether or not you want to continue with this person. Here in Japan, it's real cut and dry, that when you reach that 2nd or 3rd date, you tell him, you let him know, the guy lets the girl know traditionally how he feels and that he has the intent to continue seeing them in a very serious relationship. It seems so interesting to me and well worth discussing because I feel like it's such a polarization of beliefs or behaviors, I would say, where the Japanese, I'm not saying anything controversial to say that the Japanese as a culture and people are more shy than the West, for example. But then this 2nd or 3rd date where you do this, it actually, I would think half the reason we don't do this in the West is because we're afraid of showing such blatant and obvious emotion and commitment towards someone, and we would be arguably more outgoing, where it's it's easier for the Japanese people, I think, to act on, because when things are codified, you know exactly where you stand. But at the same time, I think it's crazy when, in contrast to their culture, where they're usually so shy, this is a big leap of faith to put yourself out there. Maybe because it's codified, this is how I speculate about it, is that because it's codified like this, failure means less, because there's such an obvious, oh yeah, people fail here all the time, and then you can distance yourself from the experience if it doesn't go exactly how you want it to go. But we all that beats within us is a shared human heart, and I can't see how you would do this kind of confession of love and you want to defend the person and whatever it is that you say to them, where were it to go poorly, that you wouldn't feel some harsh rejection from this. My other criticism that I would level at this is that I think, sure, on the one hand, it makes it easier for you to know exactly what to do, but what this leads into is a whole bunch of people rushing into relationships without actually really knowing how they feel about somebody, where I know, have had a couple of dates and then want to be with somebody. I know that, but I would still play it a little cooler, given the time that I've had on this earth, to know that feelings develop a little more slowly than that in a lot of cases. And so even if I may feel inclined to that to begin with, I don't know if I exactly want to act on it, and so there's this pressure. So that would be my criticism, is that you would arrive at a situation where, sure, it's easier because you're like, I confess, I'm interested to be with you. But then you realize 3 weeks later, you're like, oh shit, I don't want to be with you. And now to level of criticism in my own culture here, I know that a lot of people will lead each other on. Where I say that we develop organically, what this can turn into is, in a good situation, people will know that they're in a relationship and they might be like, hey, you're my girl, you're my guy, right? And it would be fine. But in a lot of situations in the West, you arrive at a point where you could not know exactly what you are, and the one person is happy with it being really, really chill, and the other person wants more commitment, and then it can be this sloppier, more awkward separation that you have to go through because it wasn't so clear. Neither system is perfect. Each system is fascinating to observe, and like I always advocate for, I think you should just have a choice of either. Really, I think it should be whatever you're comfortable with, but also when I say that, whatever you think is kind of like pushing yourself out of your comfort zone, because you have to be careful about comfort. That's something that may prevent you from ever saying that you really like somebody. Where that's maybe one more piece of respect I have for the Japanese system, is you cannot be evasive. You cannot kind of dance around whether it is that you like somebody or not. It forces the choice. So really, really, really interesting, and something that, again, I would never do personally. If I felt like I really liked somebody, say after the second or third date, yeah, then I'm totally happy to do that. But I would want that to be a result of just how into it I was, and in this particular occasion, I knew that that's what I wanted to do, but not because I knew in the background was some sort of cultural pressure that insisted that I was behaving in that way. But these are big things, big differences, and I'm always enjoying so much to see where I had taken for granted thinking there's one way to do it around the world, and that's the way that I grew up with, where no, there's definitely not. There's this, there's that, and there's 100 others I'm sure that I've not even seen. But here's another question I asked earlier in the video. Would you be happy with the allowance thing, or potentially giving up your name? Do you think that this system is better? Do you think that it's cool to have a codified system so you know where you stand? If not, how do you do it? How would you prefer? How do you do it in your country? People are watching from all over, and we've all got these different courting, dating rituals that go on, and it's really, really interesting. Okay, that's it. It's wrapped up. That's my discussion for now of the things that blow my mind in terms of relationships over in Japan. There's tons more, but we can't make this a 60-minute video. Thank you so much for watching. I really, really appreciate it. Why don't you hit that like button if you enjoyed watching it? Why don't you tap that subscribe button if you want to catch more videos like this? And if you want up-to-date notifications as to just when a hot, fresh video pops out the oven, then hit that bell notification, and for your benefit, you will be notified whenever it is that I'm posting a video. So thank you so much. I've already got the next video planned. It would be a huge, huge help to me to keep the channel running. I don't survive Obviously, I'm one of the smaller channels, so if you check out my Patreon and you support me there, there's a lot of cool goodies. I'd really appreciate if you did, whether you join up just to support the channel or to have access to a shared folder of photos I take around Japan, or do photo print giveaways. This way, that way, or the other way, if you support me on Patreon, thank you so much. It goes a long way to helping smaller channels like my own continue to thrive and grow and expand what it is they're capable of doing. But anyways, that's talking about cool gear. That's talking about supporting the channel. That's neither here nor there. Thank you so much for checking out this one. Again, I hope you really enjoyed it, and I'll catch you in the next.